To create the inner pocket, you will make a casing for elastic, use darts to create a three-dimensional shape, and thread elastic through the casing. Begin by using a single-threaded hand sewing needle to thread trace the 2 fold lines along the top of the inner pocket piece. Do not tie a knot in your thread. Use a tailor's tack at the beginning and end to secure your thread in place. If you ever run short of thread in the middle of a line, you can take a tailor's tack and simply restart where you left off. Use the sewing machine to thread trace the line running along the bottom and side. To thread trace with the machine, set the stitch width to 0 and the stitch length to 4. Sew from edge to edge and do not backstitch at the beginning or end. Press up along both fold lines. The raw edge should be hidden underneath the second fold, just like the top edge of Project 1. Be sure that the fold is lying flat and pin along the inner fold line. To prevent the fabric from shifting as you sew, it is best to place pins both vertically and horizontally along the folded edge. Set the sewing machine stitch width to 0 and the stitch length to 3.5. Use the number 1 presser foot. Line up the edge of the fold with the inner edge of the presser foot. Hold the beginning threads, sew 2 or 3 stitches, backstitch 2 or 3 stitches, and continue to sew. Use the inner edge of the presser foot as a guide to sew about 1/16 of an inch in from the folded edge. It is important to keep this stitch straight and even, as it will be visible from the right side of the pocket. Sew until you reach the edge of the fabric, back stitch 2 or 3 stitches, sew to the edge, make sure your needle is in the upright position, lift the presser foot, remove your work, and clip your threads at the beginning and end. Press along the stitching. Your casing is finished and you're ready to work on darts. Begin with the outermost dart on either side. Fold the dart in half along the center line with the right sides together. Be sure the fold passes directly through the center of the point. Place the pin vertically through both layers to mark the point of the dart. Use another pin straight down through both layers of fabric. Check to be sure that the stitch lines on both sides match. If necessary, adjust so they do. Keep the pin upright and use a second pin starting at an angle to secure it in place. Continue pinning along the stitch line of the dart. Check to be sure that the front and back stitch line match up exactly and that the dart remains flat. Here I have pinned with the point of the pins pointing towards the point of the dart. In actuality, the pin should be pointed towards the base of the dart. You will see that I switched the pins before stitching. The sewing machine width should be set to 0, the stitch length to 3. Begin sewing from the edge of the seam allowance. Backstitch at the beginning, sew until you reach the stitch line, and backstitch across the stitch line as well. Continue sewing along the stitch line until you reach the point. Note that the pins are now pointed in the direction of the base. This makes it much easier to remove the pins while sewing. Be sure to sew all the way to the very edge of the fold, hitting that point of the dart exactly. Do not backstitch at the end. Check that the needle is in the upright position and then pull the work out. Leave about a 3-inch tail of thread and clip your threads. Then use those tails to tie a double knot at the point of the dart. Be sure not to pull too tightly or it will cause the fabric to wrinkle. Stitch each of the remaining darts in this fashion. Take the inner pocket to the ironing board to press the darts. We will use the back corner of the pressing ham to help shape the darts and prevent creasing in other parts of the pocket while ironing. Place a section of the darts with the wrong side down over the back corner of the pressing hand. Use the tip of the iron to carefully press the first dart towards the center of the pocket. Do the same with the other 2 darts, readjusting your fabric so that the point of the dart is directly over the curve. Check that the fabric is lying completely flat underneath. Work to have a completely smooth transition from the end of the dart to the rest of the fabric. It may be helpful to press lightly from the right side as well. Press the darts on the other side of the pocket towards the center as well. Next, you will need a piece of 3/4 inch wide elastic. Use a ruler to measure out a piece of elastic 14 inches long. Mark and cut to length. Find 2 medium safety pins. Pin one of the safety pins to one end of the elastic. Pinch open one end of the elastic casing along the top edge of the inner pocket. Use the safety pin to push the end of the elastic into the casing. Use one hand to hold the end of the elastic in place and the other to push more of the casing onto the safety pin. Then hold onto the safety pin and pull the casing further onto the elastic. Use the other safety pin to pin the other end of the elastic to the pocket just below the case. This will prevent you from accidentally pulling this end of the elastic into the casing and losing it. Find the other safety pin, hold the end of the elastic with your hand and use your other hand to scrunch more fabric onto the safety pin and pull it back onto the elastic. Continue doing this until the safety pin reaches the end of the casing. Hold the safety pin until the end of the elastic is even with the end of the casing. Use a regular sewing pin to pin it into place and remove the safety pin. Remove the other safety pin, pull the elastic until it's even with the edge of the casing, and pin it into place as well. Using the sewing machine with a stitch length of 3, stitch across the casing 1/4 inch from the thread trace line to hold the elastic securely in place. Backstitch at the beginning and end. Serge around the sides and bottom, removing just enough seam allowance for a clean edge. Watch that the darts remain facing in the correct direction. You can and should serge over the elastic. Use the iron to carefully press up along the sides and bottom of the pocket, using the thread traced line as a guide. You have completed the inner pocket and are ready to move on to the pleated pocket.